part of my interest in mental health, I didn't realize where it was coming from. And sometimes you just drawn to a particular field, and you may not know why. I remember I was scheduled to talk to a group of teenagers about suicide. And I remember I was at the 22 mark between Little Rock and 22-mile mark between Little Rock and Conway. And any of you, you're a teacher, so capturing the attention of teenagers for any length of time can be challenging. And so I had the information, but I think that, to really capture, sometimes you need a really strong opening. And so I was being prayerful about, having a something to capture their attention when I started. And I remember just kind of it dropping in my spirit that my mother had attempted suicide. Now, I was a psychiatry resident into my third year of training, and it had never occurred to me that my mother attempted suicide while she was pregnant with me. That had been a family joke. I was born bald. Your head was bald because your mother drank Mr. Clean. So I had never connected that saying about my hair at birth to a suicide attempt, even though I was a third year psychiatry resident. And that goes to sometimes when we are experiencing traumas and people don't know what to do with their pain, they make light of it and they make jokes or whatever. And it wasn't until later that I even realized that my mom had attempted suicide. And so I was sharing this with a colleague of mine, and she asked me to make a commercial about that. Now, I was like, Black people don't air their dirty laundry. That answer will be no to that. Thank you very much. And, but she was very, she is tenacity. And so she was like, well, would you not say no? Would you just consider it? Would you talk to your family? So I talked to different ones to see if they were comfortable with me sharing. And they said yes, because that wasn't my story. That was my mother's story. And so I didn't want to put her out there like that. Well, I made a 30-second commercial with UAMS, and it went like this. I'm a physician resident in psychiatry. I didn't choose psychiatry. I was born into it. When my mother was pregnant with me, she had such severe depression that she attempted suicide. We lived. Now I devote my life to helping others like her prevent the tragedy of suicide. 30 seconds. When I tell you that commercial opened up the gates of dialogue in churches, I'd be at the elevator having people tell me, just random people that I did not know, tell me that they saw that commercial, that they struggled with that, and that they that got treatment. In fact, my real estate agent told me that she had been thinking about suicide. Her brother had attempted suicide, and she literally had gun in hand and told the Lord, if it is your will for me to live, send me a sign. And then she heard my voice. She heard my voice on a commercial in a different room, and that was her sign. And so sometimes us being courageous and sharing our stories of coming through pain, coming through tragedy, and being on the other side and being successful can literally save other people's lives. But many times we are like the woman with the issue of blood. We're going to get our healing, and then we're going to keep it in a closet, and we're not going to tell anybody. And it's not until you tell that story of the woman with the issue of blood has touched generations of people across just generations or whatever. But what if she had been outed? And so our stories are literally the antidote to someone else's pain. The scripture says, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, we overcome. And, you may not want to tell your story right now while you're in the thick of it, because maybe you're too fragile. But on the other side of it, when you are brought through this and you come out victoriously, prayerfully consider sharing at appropriate intervals. I started to tell my story after I was on the other side. One thing that I frequently talk about is, after my mom died, I didn't realize that what I was experiencing was depression. I was a medical student at the time. Um, I wasn't brushing my teeth. I wasn't cleaning. I wasn't going to class. I stopped doing all this stuff. But I didn't even, I was living through it. I didn't realize it was depression. And an associate dean who knew me and who knew what I was normally like said, "Hey, I think that you're depressed." And for me, it was like he had called me a four-letter word. I am not depressed. Even though I was thinking about hurting myself, in my mind, I was not depressed, right? And so he said to me, "I think you need to see a psychiatrist." And I was like, mm-mm. Yeah, well, I didn't say that to him. This is what I was thinking. I was like, okay. But in my mind, I was like, this man is on crack. No. and and in any event, he picked up the phone and he called the school psychiatrist, who miraculously agreed to see me that day. And I was like, okay. But in my mind, I wasn't going. He picked up his keys and he drove me to the psychiatrist's office. Had he not driven me to the psychiatrist's office, I assure you I wouldn't have gone. I do not know if that act of kindness, of that act of putting his hand in my hand, saved my life, because I had literally been visualizing myself, harming myself. I didn't have the means to do it, but I was thinking about it a lot. And yet, even though I was in the mental health training to be a mental health professional, I didn't recognize it as depression. Many times we don't even have a name for what we're going through, you know? And so I was like the woman with the issue of blood. I was content to get my health through medicine and not tell a soul. But my brother outed me. He told my pastor, "She on that stuff. You would have thought that I was smoking crack cocaine, getting it in an alley or something." And it was an FDA approved medicine. And but after I was outed and I was well, I could tell my story. And when I see patients on the other side, I understand how uncomfortable it is to be transparent. I understand how uncomfortable it is to be vulnerable. I understand how uncomfortable it is to be the strong friend who has a crack in her armor. I get that. I was raised, you don't air your dirty laundry. But I needed that experience in order to be an amazing psychiatrist. And I say that humbly. It's not because of what I am, but it's because of whose I am. And so I walk in humility as I serve people while they're going through these awful times in their life. And I give them permission to be human. And I do a holistic approach. This is not about me just giving you a medicine and you going on your way. As a matter of fact, sometimes I'm taking away medicines. Sometimes I'm dealing with the cognitive dissonance or the cognitive distortions that we in church call thinking or whatever. Sometimes our thinking is impacting us, and I don't always have to use medicines. And I'm very conservative. I don't want to use medicines unless unless there's some certain conditions met. But I'm not just trying to make you a walking pharmacy. I want you to be healthy, whole, and well, so that you can be about your Father's business, so you can walk out your purpose and do what you were called to do on this earth.
You were talking about sharing, well, me sharing my story. When I was younger, I was like 7 years old. I walked in one morning to see my dad, and he was passed out from a seizure, and that was the last time I saw him alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through some self-esteem issues and some other things in my life. And the thing about me is I've been through so many traumas that they were layered, kind of stacked.
Mm-hmm.
And at different points in my life, different things would kind of trigger a response.
Mm-hmm.
And through a life of like prayer and seeking the Lord, and other things, he's brought some of those things to me. And I definitely plan to share my story, because a lot of times we'll be a certain way. Like you say, you may have days of depression or days you feel bad, you don't want to get out of bed, whatever, but you don't know like the origin. And so
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have that outlet of prayer, and if you don't also seek therapy or something, you may never know what's wrong with you. And it could, like you say, lead to something serious. So I think if more people would share their stories, if we would, and that's kind of why I felt, one of the reasons I felt led to try to start this channel and start this show is to inspire and motivate others, because so many times people are hurting and they may not go to anybody and say, hey, I need some help, but they may watch a YouTube channel, where somebody's talking about how they got delivered or how they got healed and how they got help. So I definitely appreciate you coming on here, and helping encourage, people that, hey, that, there was a negative stigma to getting therapy and getting counseling, but there's nothing wrong with that. And people are going to joke and make fun, but some of those same people are hurting themselves, and then they don't want to get help.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And a lot of times we don't know until we hear about a family member or somebody that we know that actually did commit suicide or something. And I think that's sad. Can you
Absolutely.
can you speak a little bit about how, I know some people don't trust therapists and psychiatrists and counselors. Can you speak a little bit about the confidentiality that maybe they'll help some of them in making their decision?
Absolutely. So when you talk to your friend, your barber, your whomever, they are not bound by confidentiality. You can see your privately, vulnerably shared information on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, um, where they are weaponizing your truth after you all have had an argument or you've fallen out. The benefit of seeing a trained person with a scope of expertise and education in a field is that there is a federal law where we are HIPAA health. I can't remember what HIPAA, but we are um, bound and regulated tightly for being able to share your information that you've not permitted us to. Now, when during my first sessions, I talk about I share your information if you tell me that you're going to kill yourself, not thinking about it, but going to. If you tell me that you're going to harm someone else, if you tell me that you are actively harming a child, abusing a child or an elderly person, then legally I have to report you. Short of that, your records may be subpoenaed at times, but I have records, process notes, and then I also have the notes that are in your charts. The notes that are in your charts are actually very genetic. You can tell me about something going on with your parent, and I might just have parent-child relational conflict. It won't have the specifics. So even if you're going through something and somebody requests it, then during a court trial, then there's only a certain amount of data that they're going to get. Now, sometimes schools or insurance companies or housing or whatever will request, people will sign a release of information for me to share your records. And at that time, I personally do not share all of your records. I may draft a letter, a summary of what's happening in very generic terms. This person has been treated. I'm at my clinic for, between these dates and this dates. This person is stable. They're adhering to treatment recommendations. I don't give a diagnosis or the medicines you're on or anything unless specifically you request that. And then I'm probably going to try to discourage you from doing it. But your information is released with your signed consent for me to release your information unless, a threat to harm to yourself or others. So that piece. In this COVID age, this actually has to some degree helped me to overcome some of the barriers and the stigmatizing fears that people have to seeking treatment because they're afraid of their car being seen in the parking lot of a psych behavioral health facility, or they're afraid of who they're going to see in the waiting room or that kind of stuff. And so in post-COVID era, I'm able to deliver telehealth where you can be in the privacy of your home, and we talk through a HIPAA compliant telehealth platform that I have a business agreement on, saying that, if in any event anything happens, that can take legal recourse or whatever, so that, people can't hack into my business account that's HIPAA compliant. Now, if you're doing this on Facebook, Messenger, or whatever these platforms are, or Zoom, but not the Zoom that you pay for, the free Zoom, then all bets are off if you're doing that with somebody. But for me, my patients have the luxury of knowing that it is a HIPAA compliant telehealth platform, and you certainly should talk to whoever you're seeing to ensure that they have that. Many times you don't have to ask; it's included on our website or whatever.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
It did. It did. Do you have any tips or suggestions for us for dealing with all the stress that's going on right now? Any kind of self-care tips or things we kind of need to?
Rest. Rest is super duper important. And when I say rest, I'm not talking about 8 hours of sleep. I am talking about resting your brain as well as your body. Because, sometimes I've been in church and it looked like I was sitting there paying attention to the pastor, and I was thinking about, how, what clothes I was going to get out for my daughter. She has to study for this test, da 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 da. And my mind is just constantly working. Or I'm sitting, I may be sitting in the same room with you, but I'm working in my mind. I've not shut it off. I'm multitasking, I'm thinking through. And so finding a time where you can connect with nature, where you can connect and just be still. Um, and not be still physically, but be still here. Um, and sometimes we struggle with that. There have been times when I've made an effort to pray out loud, because if I was praying silently, I was going to my grocery list, and so I actually would have to pray out loud, or to journal my prayer so that I could stay focused. So being still here is, I think, why the scripture says in Hebrews, labor to enter into his rest. And that sounds like an oxymoron, to labor to enter into his rest. But sometimes we have to literally work to rest. And rest is so important for our bodies to recover that the scripture says, commands us that, those who didn't take a Sabbath rest were executed. Okay, and that may not make sense, but in the Jewish tradition, in the Christian tradition, it is documented that we are commanded to rest. And that's not just because you have a mean God saying, you go rest or I'm going to kill you. But there are some benefits in rest. There's some creativity that happens when you're resting. There's some restoration that happens when you rest. And that is, and that is required in order for our best selves to emerge, our best parenting selves, our best partner selves to emerge. You have to have time for recovery. And if you're a person of faith, you need to have time for downloading into your spirit so that you can understand what your purpose is. And I'm going to tell you, many times, you think, I don't have time to rest. But it's been in my prayer time, in my quiet time, that sometimes I would get a strategy that put me ahead 20 years in something that was so powerful and so innovative that I couldn't have come up with that, and the Lord will make you look brilliant. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, people will credit me with being really smart. I'm smart enough to listen to God, is what I am. But that stuff that some of you are most impressed by with me, that's not Rhonda, because Rhonda is not that smart. But Rhonda is smart enough to sit still and hear from on high. And then when I share it with you, you're like, baby, that's God all day, every day. Now, if you see me doing some foolishness, that's Rhonda. That's Rhonda all day, every day. Every good and perfect gift comes from above. And where I am right now, I would not be in this place without God. And so I go on record publicly, because I am not ashamed of the gospel. I am not ashamed to tell anybody. If it not were for the Lord on my side, I would not be a physician that is highly respected. And I'm not trying to to bring you or whatever. I'm just telling you, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We will serve the Lord openly, fearlessly, because every good and perfect gift that I have came from above. And I'm not afraid to say it.
Well, I certainly appreciate you for sharing with us today. It has been a phenomenal discussion, and I thank you for being so candid, so transparent with us today. Do you have any closing remarks that you want to make?
I want you to know that you are one of a kind. You are a masterpiece and you are a commodity. There's only one of you, and there's an impact that you are supposed to have on this planet. Shed the weight of other people's expectations about who you are supposed to be. Shed the weight of your parents' impartations that have you guilt ridden about who you are not, and um, and sit still and figure out what brings you joy. Sit still and figure out what bothers you, because sometimes um, couched in that pain, couched in that anger of what angers you is your purpose. And for me, I remember um, I felt so hopeless with all the people who had been sexually abused. I just felt just hopeless about about there being so many people, because I didn't realize so many people had been sexually abused. And so, as a new psychiatrist, there was this form, and I was supposed to ask, were you sexually abused? And if so, by whom? And so I'm, kind of shaking in my boots as I ask this question, fully expecting people to say no. And I was on an inpatient unit, so it was probably disproportionately high, but probably 80 to 90% of the population in that hospital setting had been sexually abused. And when I asked by whom, it was by uncles and cousins and dads and stepdads. And so I had grown up hearing, don't talk to strangers. And what I was figuring out was that it wasn't strangers doing this. And so, my heart was tender towards them. I wanted to help them, but I was always on the other side, helping after it had happened, and just frustrated. And so it wasn't until and angry and all of that, and it was preachers that were doing it. It was coaches, it was teachers, it was all the people that you're not trying to protect your children from. And so I got out in front of that and started working on sexual abuse prevention, working with pastors and single parents and different educators and different ones to help prevent sexual abuse. And I felt empowered. I felt like I was making a difference. And so my pain and my frustration led me to prevention work. I say that to say your pain and your frustration may be like a little flashing light of where you should be working at. And, I've shared with you that after my mother's death, I struggled. So the areas that I almost got taken out in bereavement, dying by suicide, perhaps after my mother's death, um, public failure. Those have been the areas that I've been most impactful in psychiatry, because I intimately understand the pain of that, and so I'm compassionate, and I don't treat people as a product or just to get through so I can make money. I'm actually concerned about you, and so in your pain may be your purpose. On the other side of your pain may be your purpose. And so you dive in and you explore your pain, because if you feel helpless, there's a depression that's associated with that. But if you feel empowered to reach back and make sure nobody else has to go through that, then there is power in that. And I hope that you will understand that you are not powerless, but even you, little you, can take something as simple as baking cookies, and you can minister to teachers and kids or whatever using that gift. It doesn't have to be big. I'm going to leave you with the words of Arthur Ashe. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can so you can make a difference. If you want to follow me for helpful tips, mental health tips, you can follow my Facebook page at Dr. Rhonda Mattox, Mattox, and that's Rhonda with an H. You can also find me on Instagram with Dr. Rhonda Mattox. And if you are looking to become a patient, if you would Google Psychology Today with my name, Rhonda, Rhonda, Mattox, Mattox, it will share with you how to become a patient of mine. And for some of you, you may not feel comfortable seeing me. I love to get you connected to, if you're a male psychiatrist or mental health provider, if you're part of the LGBTQ community, an LGBTQ safe provider. And I'm happy to see you on all fronts, but sometimes people prefer people who are certain genders or certain preferences or whatever. And so would love to connect with you more if you feel like I can be a blessing to you and help you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. I really appreciate you coming on here today and talking with us.
My pleasure.
And I just want to encourage anybody out there that if you're dealing with depression and anxiety, reach out and get some help. If you have something going on that you feel like you can't handle. Everybody, this has been another edition of Renee Talks with Dr. Rhonda Mattox. Again, I want to thank her for coming. I want to thank you for listening. And if something we've said has helped you today, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, this has been another Renee Talk.